Good evening. Sean Sullivan, Chair of the Town Council. I will call this meeting, April 19th, 2012, meeting public hearing of the Town of Ledyard to order. This is the public hearing to hear about the town budget for the year. The procedure for tonight is that shortly I will read the call of the public hearing. We will then have presentations on first the town budget given by Mike France, who's chair of the Town Council Finance Committee, and then we will have presentation on the Board of Ed budget, which will be presented by Michelle Hinton, the chair of the Board of Ed Finance Committee, who will also get an assist from Dr. Mike Rainier, who's the superintendent of school. After that, there will be a period for public comment. And the purposes of this meeting is for us to hear from the public on the status of the budget while we still have an opportunity to make changes prior to sending the budget to referendum pursuant to the town charter in May. So with that, I will read the call of the meeting. This is legal notice. The notice of the public hearing. The Ledyard Town Council will conduct a public hearing at 7 p.m. on Thursday, April 19th, 2012 at Ledyard High School Auditorium, 24 Gallup Hill Road, Ledyard, Connecticut, to receive comments, recommendations regarding the proposed 2012-2013 budget. At this hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard, and written communications will be accepted. Copies of the budget are available at the Town Clerk's office, April 16th, 2012, dated this day of Ledyard, Connecticut, 5th day of April 2012, and signed by me as the Town Council Chair. So with that, I will call on Chairman France, Chairman of the Town Council Finance Committee, to present the town budget.
Welcome all. First, we'll talk about the budget process. The Finance Committee met to look over the general government budget on 3 working sessions, totaling about 18 hours of discussion with the mayor and the various department heads within town government on March 8th, 15th, and 20th. It was brought to the Finance Committee for approval on April 9th. And then ultimately the Town Council approved to bring to public hearing for April 11th. Tonight is the public hearing, and as Chairman Sullivan mentioned, the town meeting to bring to referendum is May 21st, with the referendum on the 22nd. The budgets as submitted by the General Government and the Board of Ed summarized here. The General Government total of $19,677,102. which is a slight reduction over the current year, and the Board of Ed $25,944,564, a $63,000 reduction from the current year, which yielded a mill rate of potential mill rate of 28.21, a slight increase over the current one. And this is primarily due to the Education Jobs Grant that was incorporated into last year's budget of $703,000. In order to reach a zero budget, which following the working sessions, we were within 0.5% of zero. We said, well, we'll take a look at what that is. And then amounted to about $410,000. And so the Finance Committee took on the task to look at that. In the analysis during the working sessions, we observed that the town was blessed with a cost avoidance due to the mild winter of well over $100,000. And we approached the school superintendent, Dr. Rainier, to see if there was similar savings, cost avoidance on the Board of Ed side, and requested up to $200,000, or half the amount that we needed to reach zero if those costs were avoided due to the mild winter. And then the Finance Committee then reviewed the general government budget for the balance. The solution that was put forward involved both an increase on the revenue side as well as some cuts in the future year budget. The Board of Ed did, in fact, identify cost avoidance through the mild winter. They did transfer by a vote of the Board of Ed, $200,000 as revenue for the future year budget. And also on the general government side, we had $50,000 of the current budget that was transferred forward as revenue. For spending reductions are itemized there. We looked at the healthcare budget, health coverage budget, and based on the analysis of the consultant, we anticipated about a 7% minimum increase of the budget. We looked at the expenditures for this year, and we were a little bit over that amount and identified $100,000 that we could reduce there. And that was broken out as $25,000 from the general government and $75,000 from the Board of Ed, which is essentially the ratio of those two accounts in the total. In addition, the town council contingency was reduced by $10,000. We also removed the expense that was proposed by the mayor for moving the police department down to the Old Gales Ferry School. We thought that this time there was still at least two items that need to be looked at in the next several months and possibly next year, one of which is the decision on dispatch, which the mayor is looking at and anticipates an answer by the end of the summer to decide whether dispatch will remain in the town or whether we will look at providing those services from a neighboring town, a regional center. And secondly, the Board of Ed is working through discussions on what they're going to do with the sixth grade in the middle school and what that impact has on other government buildings. So the permanent building, municipal building committee has work to do in that regard. So those two items we felt it was premature to make a move to the Old Gales Ferry School with potentially a move 2 to 3 years later and spend the money twice. So we figured that the best decision was to at least defer that to the following year at a minimum, and so that was the other $25,000. In addition, we reduced the legal services budget of the town council by $10,000, which is about 10%, and the revaluation assessor by $10,000. And finally, we adjusted revenue by about $4,000, which is less than 0.01% of the budget to come to a zero budget. And that will be a mill rate of 27.93, same as the current year. The summary of expenses as approved by the town council are written there, are shown there. Essentially, you have approximately a little over $50,000 in reductions in the general government budget and $63,000 from the Board of Ed budget for a total of about $116,000 reduction. The capital improvement plan is shown here. These are the proposed capital improvements. They're essentially level. Essentially what we do in the capital improvement plan is items that are purchased over every 5 years or every 10 years. We put into the budget every year what the 1/5 or 1/10 or whatever the period is for the purchase so that we don't end up with a spike in 1 year. So that is what this amounts to, and this is the continuation of that plan. Some of the things that are unique to Ledyard, we have some of the Board of Ed expenses are carried on the general government side, and just for information purposes, these are the 3 line items. We have the health care coverage for the Board of Ed and the workers' comp for Board of Ed, as well as school nursing, which are carried on the general government side. So in order to get a good or more true picture of what the general government truly is and what the Board of Ed truly is, these figures are then rolled into the next slide, which we see the total budget on the top that was approved by the town council, which will go to, which if not unchanged, will go to referendum, and then the actual cost expense split between the Board of Ed and the general government. And this is in line with most of the other trends. About 67% or 2/3 of the budget belongs to the Board of Ed, and about 1/3 of the budget belongs to general government. This slide gives you an idea of from a pictorial view, what the breakdown of the cost between the various parts of the government. As you can see, 2/3, the biggest slice is our education system, and then the remainder of that is our itemized in the table there to the left, and provides the percentages for each budget. In the current year budget, some of the things that we put forward as changes to the structure of the government within the town. First, there was an administrator of emergency services that was hired. Essentially, it reduced or helped reduce the workload from the administrative standpoint for both the Gales Ferry and Ledyard fire chiefs. In addition, it improved the coordination of resources and tracking of expenses among the fire departments. So far, it's been a success. Russell Shaw has done a great job in that position. In addition, we reestablished the DARE program in schools. With single stream recycling initiative under Mayor Allen, this is the result of that. What we've seen, just as background for the residents, each ton of waste that is transferred from waste to recycling, recyclable, saves or results in a net savings to the town of $100. So trash costs about $65 per ton to take away, and when we recycle, we get about $35 a ton back from the recycling company. So net is $100. And since the transition, the average of the recycling has gone from about 18 to 21%, and that resulted in a net 20% reduction in the next year's budget. And as the banner at the bottom says, this is the one area of the budget that the town has a direct impact on. The more we recycle, the more we look at what is available to recycle and make use of that, the greater the impact that the residents can have on the future budgets. For the future budget, the next year's budget, some of the efficiencies that are implemented in this budget, we have within the town government, the mayor has combined several part-time and office-specific positions into a single flexible floater, which will work for multiple departments. In addition, enhancing the technology within the town, primarily with the town clerk's office, but also with IQM2 as a tool that provides the online access for forms and for information to the residents. In addition, by putting utility accounts in a single account, it allows better management of those funds under single departments. One example of this, a large change in this, has all these components to it, is in the land use department. It was reorganized into to expedite the approval for both residential and commercial development. Here's a graphic of what we used to have. Each department had its own administrative assistant, so that this was not a very efficient way to do it, because you never really probably fully loaded at any one time. There were probably peaks and valleys in each one of those assistant positions. The mayor's proposed in the next budget, and has started implementing, is now to have an administrative assistant and a clerical assistant that supports all three departments. So now you have the flexibility that during times of peak in one department or the other, you can then focus on the needs of that department. Within the additional town government improvements, the old Gales Ferry School, in this current budget, for the first time, that facility will be financially self-sustaining. We have tenants in the building, and we have established that the revenue that is generated from those tenants is what is put into the budget as expenses. And so those balance. So if there are additional tenants that are brought in during the year, that will then allow future improvements or maintenance that's required for the school. Essentially what this means, it's been about 11 years that the school has been up for sale and has been partially used. And now we have a longer-term tenants, and is no longer a financial liability of the town. I mentioned IQM2. It's a web portal. The town council established at the beginning of this fiscal year and this term that we would be going paperless. So we go to town council meetings, instead of having several hundred pages or multiple hundreds of pages of documents for each town councilor to review and then to approve. Everything's done paperless. We all have laptops in front of us at the town council meetings. The number that was estimated by one of the councilors saw was about $50,000 savings just in the paper copying. It also institutes a formal document approval process within town government. so that you don't have to shuffle paper between departments and then ultimately to the mayor for approval. You can do that all electronically. And it also improves citizen access to town documents. So there's a public access to that website. You can look at the documents that are right before the town. You can look at the town council as it's happening and follow right along with the agenda on the screen. Another lesson learned out of Hurricane Irene. Councilor Davis and the IT committee have looked at several options for enhanced notification, improved notification to the residents of the town of what to do in an emergency, where things are, services, and they settled on the Everbridge emergency notification system. It comes with, in the base package, 3 different components that are designed to bring in the data from the town. It has an interface with the white pages. In addition to that, it has an ability to opt in for cell phones, emails, and other things like that. And then the aware portion is the notification portion. So it allows immediate notification for residents within the town so that they would know where to go. As many people were aware, there was water and MREs in the center of town, and the only way you really knew that was to stumble across it and then word of mouth. In many cases, there were people that only found out about it after it was gone. This system would then allow notification in a timely fashion on those kinds of things, as well as what services are available and where to go to receive other services. And finally, the town clerk office. As many of you know, our longtime town clerk retired, and Mike Curley has been hired on there. He has a number of ideas on enhancements to bring many of the paper records to be available online, in addition to have forms and things of that available to the residents of the town, the ordinances and resolutions, and vital records, maps, etc. It is a move into the 21st century to be able to have access to those items. The technology has existed for a long time. It's now the initiative to move forward and take the action to provide that service to the town. And with that, I will turn over to Sean.
So thank you, Chairman France, and I will now call for the Board of Education budget presentation. I call upon Chairwoman Hinton, the Chair of the Board of Education Finance Committee.
Good evening. I wanted to first just thank everybody who came out. I know we're a small group, but I think it's an important night to just listen and hear what the town side has done and presented, and also what the Board of Ed. Board of Ed, we've been very busy the past 8 months, so I'd like to go through the timeline quickly. First draft of this budget was presented, actually talked about in September, where we saw that we needed an increase of just over $1 million. And the Finance Committee approached Dr. Grenier and said, requested the 0% budget, so no increases. So when he came back and showed us that in December, that was our first look at what the cuts were going to be. And so once people in town saw that, we had scheduled a public forum, and that happened in January. Just prior to that, Mike France and his committee and my committee, we had a joint meeting where we did go through kind of line by line our budget, their budget, and we just kind of saw where those intermingled and questions were answered in between the two committees. We had two public forums, and they were very, very beneficial. In fact, one of them was in this room where we had about 150 people. And once the kind of cuts got out into the public on what positions were going to be cut, names were kind of given, positions were given, those who kind of came to bat made their voices heard. So we had heard about Project Oceanology, we heard about some music departments that may have been affected. Once we had the second budget forum, the Finance Committee then went back, and these were all in a concession of probably 3 or 4 weeks. We were meeting on a regular basis, where we went back, looked at our budget again, asked Kathy Patterson and Dr. Grenier to reevaluate the budget, based on some of the comments that we had seen and heard, some letters that we also received, and then we reorganized the budget. The final budget was presented to the mayor, and that was voted on by all 9 Board of Ed members. There were 3 major challenges when doing the budget process. We're a budget committee of 3 members, and Dr. Grenier, and Bill Merrill is extremely valuable to us too. One is we anticipated unchanged funding from the state of Connecticut. We didn't expect anything else to come. Number 2 is that we had commitments over $1 million, just over $1 million. So that was, something that we didn't have a lot of leeway with. And then number 3 is, I know a lot of people heard about the $703,000. And that was a grant from the previous year, and that was a one-time federal grant, so we actually had to accommodate that as well. When we talk about the increase of just over $1 million, it actually comes from 3 categories. And when doing the budget, Board of Ed budget, we're always broken into 3 categories. One is the salary and the benefits area, which is actually the people. And you'll see, obviously, by that number, that is where the majority... Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Thank you. You can see by that number that the people and the salary and the benefit, that's where the major part of the increase comes from. Instructional accounts is the books and instructional materials. There's been some talk in town and obviously through the state that we're going to Common Core, which is something that actually out of 50 states, 48 states are going to, where there'll be national testing and global testing. So probably heard some talk that we're getting rid of CAP testing. So that required some new materials to be purchased, computerized and textbooks. And then the third category would be the operations, just the day-to-day running of our buildings. So when we talk about the $1 million, that's kind of where the money was broken down into. The non-personnel account broken down into the categories that you can see on the screen: textbooks, the benefits, energy account, district software. And the biggest portion of this department would be the transportation, $122,000. How did we do that? We actually reduced 2 buses. We relooked at, we had a bus committee. We relooked at the routes. We actually got on some buses. Some of our members did, and we retraced those. We counted how many people. I know a lot of even town council members said that occasionally they would see buses with 3 or 4 people, and that some of it couldn't be reworked based on certain towns, certain streets and remote areas in Ledyard. And then the other one too, we went back to the bus company and we renegotiated for lower rates for the current year and also for next year. So that was our biggest increased savings right there. $781, that's a very big number. $781,000. When you talk about the people accounts, to me those have names, those have faces, those have families who come behind them. The first 3 categories there, the paraprofessionals, the administrators, and the district staff, those 3 groups of people took a 0% increase. So there were no raises given to our paras or administrators or our district staff. Custodians, we were able to save $36,000 by reducing 2 half-time custodians. Secretary account, 1 part-time secretary. Between the anticipated retirements and resignations, we had the retirement account of $237,000. And teachers, which really equivalates to 8 teachers, was the majority. Those are real people. And a lot of that, too, had to do with lower enrollment, $377,000, for a total of $781,420. So if we add those 2 numbers together, the non-personnel and the personnel, that's how we come up with just over $1 million. You going to talk from there? No. Oh, okay.
I'll hop in and just do a very brief overview of sort of the essentials of a public budget. Basically, budgets can be broken down pretty easily into three categories. There's the salary account, which is of course the big, huge part of the budget. 29.5 million, 22 go to pay for the people. The next account are the instructional accounts, which pay for books and supplies and computers and whatever. And then there are operational accounts, which includes heating, fuel, transportation, and so forth. And so if you, this is actually on page 3 of the handout that we provided. Although I must say, since the budget was printed, we've actually made some additional. We had to cut $63,000. So we've made a couple of little reductions. But basically, what we've been able to do here is, as you can see, the salary account is just a very slight decrease. So although the salaries of the individuals are going up, the salary account itself stayed flat, and the benefits actually came down a little bit. And so our total of the big, huge $22 million account actually stayed flat. The accounts for the schools, we actually break it down so that a school, take Ledyard Center School, for example, has $92,500. That includes sports equipment, paper, pencils, consumable supplies, whatever. That has remained essentially the same. Just a couple of differences. One is we put $75,000 back. That is the cost of the middle school Project O. It was actually left out with just sort of an auditing omission. So it's not really an increase, but we put it back because it wasn't in our spending plan. A little bit of an increase anticipated in special education. So the total budget for a $3.2 million account went up just very modestly, $5,000. And in terms of operational accounts, again, we've had mostly zeros or reductions. The district account pays for everything, but primarily actually textbooks. We've had a big investment in textbooks in that account. But we also had a $65,000. Again, it's sort of an auditing thing. We had in our spend plan. We didn't have sufficient funds for the tutors that we have, and so we put the tutors in a district-wide account. A little bit of we took $55,000 out of the plant and operations. And we took out that $55,000. By the way, is mostly fuel oil. And then we, as Mrs. Hinton said, we reduced the budget for the school buses. So basically the budget with a small decrease. The state has a law that says you cannot reduce the budget for next year any more so than at least equal to the current year budget, unless there's a decrease in students. And we had a slight decrease, 21 students, and you can reduce $3,000 per student. So in fact, the budget is a little bit lower. I thought it was helpful to look at a 5-year history. It's been basically flat or down, and then this current year, because of the federal education grant that we had, was actually up a bit. But the 5-year history is less than 1% increase. And I'm going to let Michelle talk a little bit.
You know, why are we so proud of the budget that we presented to the mayor? There's basically 3 reasons, and we kind of stood by this as a board, and we stood by this as the finance committee, is that we were able to maintain class size. As a parent with 2 students in the school system, it was important to me that we didn't go up to 25 to 30 students per class. We were able to continue all extracurricular and curricular activities, and this includes our music program and the Project O. We didn't touch any sports programs like some of our neighboring towns did. And we were able to support educational reforms. We're transferring, obviously, to the Common Core, which is not wasn't an optional, it's definitely a mandatory thing. And at Ledyard High School, we're starting a new scheduling program starting in the fall.
Just a few words about the capital plan that Mr. Friend spoke of. The program that we had this year, we are very, very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish thanks to the generosity of the town. We had an asbestos project which brought really new life to Gills Ferry School. We ripped up the floor tiles and put in new tiles, Gallup Hill, excuse me. The next project we had was the original bleachers that had been evaluated by an engineer and said euphemistically that they were nearing the end of their useful life. I didn't want to see the actual end of their useful life on the front page of the New London Day. So we, thanks to, again, the generosity of the town, we put in this modern bleacher which has risers and things, and people are not able to fall down any longer the way the old bleachers used to. And we renovated another science lab. So we've done 4 science labs in the last 5 years. And we're just about up to speed. Actually, all of our chemistry labs and now the physics lab has modern equipment like that. And the last improvement was actually a reflection of some of the money that we saved. Again, thanks to the generosity of the town, we switched from burning fuel oil to natural gas on the 3 schools in Gales Ferry, and that saved us. We projected a savings of about $50,000, and in fact, it saved us well more than that. Partly because it was a mild winter, but the price of natural gas, of course, is much less. And then this year, what's in the budget is we have a project here in this building, the first floor of this front part of the school, and the second floor will have the asbestos removed. So, in fact, the Permanent Building Committee just awarded the bid last night. So we will start that work immediately after graduation. The students are not allowed in the building during that time. So probably pretty much for the month of July, this building will be off limits, but it really makes a besides the safety aspect of it, makes for a remarkable improvement. Then we will undertake, we hope, some electrical upgrades. When some of our buildings were constructed in the 40s and 60s, no one had any idea of the kind of the electrical usage that we're going to have. And we now have these teaching aids called Promethean boards or smart boards, and they're just wonderful pieces of technology, but they're very energy intensive with a projector and essentially it's a big computer. And so from time to time, too frequently, at the elementary schools, the circuit breaker is tripped, and we know that we're nearing our capacity there, so we want to make sure we have a proper upgrade. And then the last thing is, now that we don't have petroleum that we're burning at 3 schools on the campus, we want to remove those tanks that become environmental hazards, empty fuel tanks. We didn't want to forget about them, so we put it in our capital improvement plan. And I'll end with...
So in conclusion, as far as the Board of Education budget, our goals for this year, which kind of remain the same as always our goal, would be to continue our outstanding curricula that we have, which again is transferring to the Common Core state standards. Superior instruction, one thing we always talk about at Board of Ed when we have our retreats or when we have our meetings is putting the best people on the bus, the right seats on the bus, putting the best educators in the right locations. We've offered some great professional development for our staff, and as far as cultural culture of excellence. We're following the process. It was truly a pleasure to work with Mr. France and his committee, and just to see that both sides could definitely come together. As far as excellence too, you touched on that. When we hoping to transfer the 6th graders to the Ledyard Middle School, and we'd love to introduce all-day kindergarten to the town of Ledyard. Communication is improving. You're going to see, just like the town council, our Board of Ed meetings will be soon to be paperless. Live feed, we've started at all of our Board of Ed meetings, and just having the public forums that we did have during this budget process, I think was extremely valuable. Our first meeting, we had about 60 or 70 people, and again, our last meeting, we had about 150 in this room. And just the thoughts or the direction that their thought process was coming from really made us understand the importance and really what they wanted to see in a budget. I'm just going to end on a thought that we've had as a Board of Ed and as a Finance Committee for the Board of Ed, that we've, over the past 5 years, have presented almost a 0% budget. And I'm just going to put the thought out there that I don't know if we can do that any longer. So when we're talking about the budget process for future years, we might have to look at not having a 0%. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hinton and Superintendent Grenier. At this point in the public hearing, we move to the part where there is public comment. I will just start off briefly as Sean Sullivan, 159 Military Highway. I want to thank the Board of Education. I want to thank Dr. Grenier. I want to thank the Mayor. As the chair of the Town Council, I'm proud of what the Town Council has done, but quite frankly, there was not a whole lot for us to do. Given the fact that I thought we got an excellent input from both the Board of Education and from the Mayor, 2/3 of the budget is the Board of Education. Continue to provide what I think is very high-quality education and holding the line on spending. And I thank all of you for doing that. The Mayor Rodrigo, brought forward his first budget as mayor, and I think Councilor Wadecki, who's here tonight in the back, but who I think has been around for many years and seen more budgets than the rest of us together in this town. And her comment was that this was one of the best, if not the best, that she's ever seen a mayor bring forward. So I thank the mayor for doing that, and it left very, very minor work for the council to do, and that was much appreciated. So I think we have a very excellent budget all around, maintains services, maintains quality, but it does hold the line on taxes, and I think that's the right answer. If there is a danger to this budget, it is complacency, lack of controversy. Generally means lack of a lot of attention in the local press, which generally means that referendum day may roll around and very many people will not even know that we are in fact having the referendum required by the town charter. And if very few people show up for the referendum, that can mean that a small but determined group of opponents, for whatever reason, could throw us into disarray. So I encourage everybody to, who has worked hard on this budget, to call their friends, call their associates, ask them to come out and support the budget on referendum day. And with that, I will cease talking and open the period for public comment. Anybody who wishes to make a comment, please feel free to come up. We have a microphone here, we have a microphone there, or ask a question. Mr. Jones, yes. Okay, just so for the purposes of having a recording, or for anybody in the back who didn't hear, that was former Town Council Chairman Terry Jones asked the mayor to comment about the cooperation of the collective bargaining units in trying to move forward in the town. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We are in the process of negotiating with many of our actually all of our unions. The town hall is comprised of, I'm going to guess, 6 different unions. Those that we have settled with a no increase, a 0 increase in the first year. In addition, all of those bargaining units have agreed that all new employees will enter into a defined contribution pension plan, which is very important to the town. If you look at state government and what's going on there with pensions, the red ink is endless. We recognize that even though right now our pension funds are fully funded, or approximately fully funded, and in very good shape, we recognize that down the line that can change very quickly. And so we have gotten cooperation in that sense, and that the unions have recognized what needs to be done. The 2 out years for the unions, they're all 3-year contracts. Again, all unions to date have agreed to 2% increases. So again, there has been a level of cooperation in those areas.
Any other comments or questions? Don't be shy. Yes, come on up.
Okay, Stephanie Calhoun, 118 Gallup Hill Road. Always thinking ahead. So I'm just wondering if anybody else is thinking ahead to next year's budget. Do you anticipate another 0, both town side, Board of Ed? And if not, what do you anticipate? I think we have to come to the realization and start working on fellow citizens that either taxes are going to have to increase or other sources of revenue will need to increase, because it's wonderful that we have a 0 this year, but I don't see how we can sustain that 0 healthcare costs, retirement costs, the 2%. It's great they took a 0 next year, but the year after they get a 2%. So how is there a plan to accommodate that? And then also, does the town have a strategic plan? Like, this is where we are in 2012, and this is where we want to be in 2020, and these are the steps that we're going to take to get there.
Well, Stephanie, I'll try to address some of your points, and then I'll allow any other town official who wants to address some to come on up and address. Simply put, we're always trying to think ahead, but it is difficult to predict. Within the space of a year, many things will change, including the financial health of the state and federal governments and how much they may contribute next year. When I say next year, I'm talking about when we stand here a year from tonight, thinking about the 2013 to 14 budget, how much in revenue will we be receiving from the state and federal governments? That is difficult for us to predict. There are other factors that again make it tough for us to stand here and tell you to answer the question: do we see no tax increase next year, or do we see a modest tax increase, or something even different? I can tell you that last year when we stood here, we said, gee, we have this $703,000 one-time grant, and that will be difficult to make up for without a tax increase. We said that a year ago. And then turns out that 2 things happened which significantly helped. One is that there is a modest increase in the amount of state revenue that is coming to us this year. And if I know that State Representative Reynolds could not make it tonight because he is in session in Hartford. He did talk to me this morning. He wanted me to give his apologies, but he also wanted to let everybody know that he was working hard to get money for the town of Ledyard, and in fact he has numbers that are available that will show that there is an increase of approximately $380,000 in the amount of state revenue that we will be receiving this year. So that helped make up a big difference. And the other thing, quite frankly, that helped make up a big difference was the fact that Mother Nature cooperated, and we had such nice weather over the winter. And much of the money that we anticipated spending this year, we didn't have to spend, and we get to carry that forward next year. So there's always things that we can't predict about what will happen between now and next year, and whether or not, next year's budget will be significantly different than this year. We do the best we can. I've heard the theory many times that, holding the line on tax increases only puts off the day of reckoning, and someday you'll need a big tax increase. I mean, quite frankly, I subscribe to a completely opposite theory, which is there's no reason to pay tax money this year if you don't have to. We'll pay when we have to, but not until then. What's right is up to the people of the town when they elect their representatives, and we follow accordingly. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I'll let any other town official who wants to come up and address Ms. Calhoun's questions to speak.
I think I can speak for the board. We anticipate, much as the mayor said, to go into negotiations and achieve modest increases in salary. I know that next year the education cost sharing grant is going to go up by $111,000. I know that the agri-science operating grant is going to go up by approximately $200,000. So if we can, the same story is true every year. If we can keep the increases relatively modest, and we continue to receive some modest increases in state aid, that plus perhaps, and I say this as a taxpayer, would anticipate some modest increases in taxes. But I think through that process we can maintain stable quality services. Because I'll also say as a taxpayer, what I want to avoid is living in a town where people say, education gets cut and cut and cut, and the value, or certainly the perceived value of our homes goes down because of that. So I think there's a balance, and I think we've achieved that. And this year, with the huge cut that the board took, we understood going into it that there was a $700,000 burden that the town was going to have to pick up. So, but in the future, going forward, I think a modest increase should be expected, but we will be able to maintain the quality of our program. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, you want to make a point? Please come on up.
Yeah.
I see one of
This is a very strange year. I've heard more people tell me comments about almost why we should have raised taxes than people saying, wow, good job, we didn't raise taxes. And I know there's a concern. There always is a concern. As you know, I've always subscribed to holding taxes as low as possible. Despite that, and despite council actions that we've had and mayoral action that is taken and Board of Education to hold the line, I have a little chart that I carry around with me that I've given to most of you that indicates that our taxes are the highest in southeastern Connecticut. After this budget season, we will probably still be in the top 3. Look at a town like Stonington. They haven't raised taxes in many years. In fact, every time they go to raise taxes, as they do this year, the budget usually gets defeated and they cut things more. I understand the concern, but can we go on without raising taxes? Absolutely not, unless we change our model. The current model that we use, that we live to with the Board of Education and the town side, is unsustainable. I didn't say that. Tom Reynolds said that. Tom Reynolds is one of the most respected officials that I know. He recognizes that if we continue to do business the way we do business, absolutely taxes will go up every year. Do we have a strategic plan? I plan to have one. I plan to work with every one of my department heads and set goals for them, and one of the goals being, how do we change the model? We can't just, if we take every year's budget, look at it, put in the increases we have to do, and keep the same organizational structures, no, we will not be able to do what we need to do. but my plan is to do something different. My plan is to change the model, because I recognize that when the state finally sets their house in order, the burden is going to fall down on the towns. We know that. And to raise taxes more than what they are in Ledyard right now puts us at a severe disadvantage. We had a great event this morning. We welcomed our first business in about 6 years, first large construction commercial business in about 6 years. It hasn't been since Village Market that we've had a major construction project in town. One of the reasons for that, of course, is infrastructure. The other reason is taxes. It is very difficult to attract businesses to a town when they have to drive past towns whose taxes are literally half what ours are. So we're going to work hard. I know the superintendent's going to work hard. I plan to work with him. If you have ideas on how we can change things, please let me know, because it's something we absolutely have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Eichelberg.
I want to address the grand planned idea, really more as, not as a counselor, but as having served for nearly 10 years on the Economic Development Commission in town. Recently I was up in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and I happened to go online to check out the town, see what kind of things were offered there. My wife and I were staying at the Red Lion Inn. There isn't an awful lot around there, a few things. But I noticed it was a town of fewer than 10,000 people. But when we got there, I looked at Main Street, and Main Street, they had done everything correctly. They had on-street parking, they had beautiful sidewalks, they had telephone lines, power lines, underground. All of the presentations that I had gone to and observed as chair of EDC, they did everything right. And so I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out how this tiny little town could have done all of this. And as my wife and I were driving around to the different sites, all of a sudden it hit me when I saw the regional high school. There's a regional high school there that serves several towns. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily Ledyard's grand plan for the future, but what I am saying is the commissions and committees in this town have worked very hard in the last 10 years to position Ledyard for economic development. We have a lot of hurdles to overcome as a town. We don't have any major highways. We don't have infrastructure everywhere that we need. As the mayor mentioned, we have a tax rate that is not exactly attractive to many businesses, but we've worked very hard at streamlining the process, at trying to be as attractive as we can. And I couldn't give you the numbers right off the top of my head, but if I recall, we have roughly a 90-10 tax base in this town, where 10% of our taxes come from businesses. And that is simply not sustainable. We have to continue to work hard on economic development. We have to continue to work hard on infrastructure to develop those things. And we have worked very hard. So I think that we do have a plan for the future. As the mayor said, we need to look at ways that we can change the model going forward. But we also need to continue with the plans that we've put in place, the new zoning laws that we're working on, the planning, the land use commission. They have done a great job positioning us. And Kevin, you might want to speak to that, but I think that we have put together a pretty good, we have bookshelves lined with studies about what Ledyard could look like if we had the money. And that's tax money. We know it's tax money. Some of it comes from grants, but mostly it's tax money. And that's hard to get when you can't attract businesses. But we are working hard to do that.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak here tonight? Anyone at all? Okay, going once, going twice. Yes, FX Williams. Boy, I I almost closed things down.
I just can't sit there and not take the chance to say thank you, all of you, for all the work you've done. And that's it.
Thank you, and for the record, that was FX Williams of, what's your address? 8 Hyde Park Drive. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn this public hearing, and the next steps, as mentioned, will be a town meeting on the 21st of May, followed by a referendum on the 22nd. Thank you very much.